The crack of gunfire split the mountain air like the world tearing in half. Sergeant Elena Cross pressed her body against frozen stone, the cold seeping through tactical gear that was supposed to keep her warm at 12,000 feet. It didn't. Nothing kept you warm at this altitude when you'd been motionless for 6 hours waiting, following orders that felt wrong in your gut. Through her scope, the valley below had transformed into hell. 12 men. SEAL Team 12, this radio chatter had identified them. 12 of America's finest warriors pinned down in a kill box that someone had designed with brutal efficiency. The rocky terrain that was supposed to provide cover had become a trap. Enemy positions on 3 ridgelines formed a perfect triangle of overlapping fire. Whoever planned this ambush knew exactly what they were doing. Elena counted enemy fighters through her scope. 23 visible. Probably more in the shadows in the dead spaces her elevated position couldn't see. They moved with discipline, fire team tactics, professional spacing. These weren't scattered insurgents or local militia. These were trained soldiers. Her radio crackled with fragments of desperate voices. Contact rear, multiple hostiles. They're flanking left. We're surrounded. That last word hung in the thin mountain air. Surrounded. Lena had heard that word before in another place, another time spoken by another voice that no longer existed in this world. Her finger rested alongside the trigger guard of her custom M210 ESR. Not on the trigger, not yet. The rules were crystal clear, had been drilled into her during 6 months of Ghost Protocol training. Observe, report, record. Do not engage. Do not reveal yourself. Do not exist. Ghost didn't leave footprints. Ghost didn't fire shots. Ghost didn't save lives. Wind gusted across the ridge 12 miles per hour from the northeast, carrying the scent of gunpowder and something else. Fear. You could smell it at this distance if you'd been in enough fights. The acrid copper tang of adrenaline in blood. Elena's breath came in measured cycles, perfectly controlled despite the altitude. Temperature -8 degrees Celsius. Humidity 32%. Atmospheric pressure 640 millibars. Distance to nearest enemy position 760 meters. She'd made harder shots before. Through her scope, she watched the enemy commander. A tall man in tactical black, directing his fighters with hand signals, was orchestrating the slaughter with the calm precision of a conductor leading an orchestra. He was grouping forces for a final push, concentrating fire on the SEAL team's weakest flank. In 90 seconds, maybe less, 12 American warriors would be overrun. Elena's jaw tightened. Her mind flashed back 18 months to another mountain range, another doomed mission, another moment when following orders had meant watching good people die. Kate Brennan's face surfaced in her memory. Not the way Kate had looked at the end, bleeding out in Syrian dust, but the way she'd looked that morning, smiling, confident, alive. "Promise me something," Kate had said during their pre-mission brief in the safe house outside Damascus. They'd been going over satellite imagery marking routes, identifying exfil points, standard procedure for a Ghost Protocol reconnaissance operation. If the intel smells wrong, you speak up. You don't stay quiet just because some desk jockey in Virginia says it's solid. Elena had laughed it off then. "Since when do you not trust command?" "Since I started trusting my gut more." Kate had tapped the map with her pen. "These roads here, too exposed, too convenient. If I were setting an ambush, this is exactly where I'd do it." Kate had been right. The roads were an ambush. But command had overruled their assessment. The mission proceeded as planned. And Kate Brennan, the best spotter Elena had ever worked with, the closest thing to a sister she'd ever known, had died protecting her when the trap sprang shut. Kate's last words whispered through blood-flecked lips, "Promise me. Never stay silent again." Elena had made that promise. She had meant it. Below her in the Colorado Valley, the enemy commander raised his rifle to signal the final assault. Elena's finger moved to the trigger. The scope's reticle settled on the commander's center mass. The world narrowed to that circle of magnified vision, to the space between one heartbeat and the next, to the moment that separates thought from action. She exhaled halfway and held it. The M210 barked once, the suppressor reducing the report to a sharp crack that echoed off valley walls. The recoil pushed against her shoulder, familiar as breathing. Through the scope, she watched the enemy commander's head snap back, watched him crumple like a puppet with cut strings. One shot, one kill, 760 meters. The sound of the rifle reached the valley a heartbeat later, rolling across the rocks like distant thunder. The enemy fighters froze heads, swiveling, trying to locate the source of fire that had just decapitated their leadership. They fired blindly at ridgelines, unable to pinpoint her position. Elena was already moving. The key to surviving as a sniper wasn't the shooting. Any competent marksman could make the shot. Survival was about what came after. Shoot and move. Never stay static. Never let them triangulate your position. She low-crawled 15 meters to her second position, a depression between two boulders she'd scouted during her insertion 6 hours earlier. Her ghillie suit snagged on rocks, but she moved with practiced efficiency, covering the distance in 20 seconds. Through her scope at the new angle, she acquired her second target, the machine gunner who'd been shredding the SEAL team's cover. He was good disciplined, firing controlled bursts from behind a fortified position. But he'd made one mistake. He'd stayed in the same spot too long. Distance 820 meters. Elevated angle. Wind pushing her shot pattern 3 inches right. Elena adjusted, found her breathing rhythm, pressed the trigger. The machine gunner's weapon went silent. Third shot. The spotter directing mortar fire crouched behind a boulder with a radio pressed to his ear. 900 meters. She led his movement as he shifted position, calculated where he'd be in the time it took the bullet to arrive. The spotter dropped mid-sentence, his radio clattering on rocks. The enemy force scattered, diving for cover, their coordinated assault dissolving into chaos. They were well-trained, but training couldn't prepare you for an invisible opponent who struck from impossible distances with mechanical precision. Elena displaced again, moving to her third position on the northern face of the ridge. Her lungs burned from the altitude and exertion, but her hands remained steady. 11 pounds of rifle felt like 50 after 6 hours of motionless observation, but she'd carried heavier loads through worse terrain. She identified targets by priority. Leaders first, anyone giving orders on coordinating movement. Heavy weapons second, anyone carrying RPGs or crew-served weapons. Communications, third, radio operators who could call for reinforcements. 4 more shots. 4 more kills. The enemy's communication network collapsed. Below, the SEAL team was reorganizing, using the confusion to redistribute ammunition and tighten their defensive perimeter. They were professionals, adapting instantly to the unexpected support. Elena keyed her concealed radio to the emergency frequency. Using it would blow her ghost protocol cover completely, mark her as a rogue operator, probably end her career. She didn't hesitate. Hammer 1, this is Overwatch. You have approximately 8 minutes before they regroup and call artillery strikes on your position. Recommend immediate displacement, northeast bearing, 045 200 meters. Boulder cluster will give you hard cover. Silence on the other end. Then a voice, calm despite the circumstances. Overwatch, identify yourself. Negative. Move now or you're all dead. Overwatch out. She didn't wait for a response. Her scope swept back to the valley floor, searching for the enemy radio operator who would be calling for those artillery strikes. She found him crouched behind a boulder, speaking rapidly into his handset. Distance 850 meters. Wind had shifted now, quartering from the left at 14 miles per hour. The shot would drift 6 inches without compensation. Elena adjusted her hold, exhaled, squeezed. The radio operator's call for artillery died with him. Her radio crackled again. A different voice, this time older, carrying the weight of command and something else. Recognition. Overwatch, this is Colonel Stone, quick reaction force, inbound to Hammer 1's position. I need to know who I'm coordinating with. Elena's breath caught. Colonel Garrett Stone. She'd recognize that voice anywhere. 4 years ago, he'd been the senior instructor at Fort Benning's sniper school, the man who'd pushed her harder than anyone who'd seen potential in her when others saw only a woman trying to break into an old boys club. He'd taught her advanced tactics, wilderness, survival, the mental discipline required to make impossible shots under impossible conditions. And now he was here on this mountain, about to walk into a situation that was getting worse by the second. Through her scope, Elena saw movement on the eastern approach. A column of troops moving, tactical spacing, correct weapons ready. Garrett's quick reaction force. 12 more men heading toward the kill box. But something was wrong. Elena glassed the enemy positions again, counting, assessing, calculating angles. The enemy hadn't retreated. They'd repositioned. They were setting up a new ambush, this time designed to catch both the original SEAL team and the relief force. Whoever was running this operation had anticipated outside support. Her radio crackled with tactical chatter as Garrett's team coordinated with Hammer 1. Professional efficient walking straight into another trap because they didn't have the elevated view, didn't see the full picture. Elena made a decision that would change everything. Colonel Stone Overwatch. Enemy is repositioning for ambush on your approach vector. 40-plus fighters in concealed positions, bearing 090 through 120 from Hammer 1's location. They're letting you come to them. A pause, then, Overwatch, how do you have that intel? Because I can see the whole board, sir, and the board says you're about to lose 24 men. Copy that. No hesitation in Garrett's voice, no questioning her assessment. He trusted the information, adjusted his approach immediately. Hammer 1 Stone, we're altering approach coming up the western ridge. Overwatch, we're going to need support. Elena was already scanning for targets. Send it. Enemy heavy weapons positions. We'll suppress, but we need you to neutralize anything that can kill us on the approach. Through her scope, she identified 3 RPG teams and 2 more machine gun nests the enemy had deployed. They'd learned from their first encounter, spreading out using better cover. She'd have to be perfect. 5 targets, maybe 30 seconds before they realized they were being hunted, before they went to ground or charged positions. Elena's breathing slowed. Her heart rate dropped. The world reduced to the scope's view to calculations of wind and distance in the precise moment when stillness transformed into action. First target RPG team at 900 meters, partially concealed behind rocks. She could see the warhead, the distinctive shape of the launcher. She aimed 6 inches left of where the operator's head should be, accounting for the boulder's concealment. The shot broke clean. The RPG clattered, unused to the ground. Second target machine gunner at 740 meters, setting up on a ridgeline that would devastate Garrett's approach. Perfect position, perfect field of fire. He'd thought himself safe at that range. He'd thought wrong. Third target, and another RPG, this one already shouldered operator tracking Garrett's moving column. No time for perfect setup. Elena fired on instinct, and training letting muscle memory guide the shot. The operator spun and fell, the RPG firing wild into empty sky. Fourth and fifth targets came in rapid succession, 2 machine gunners who'd finally spotted her muzzle flash and were turning their weapons toward her position. She took the closer one first, then adjusted 40 degrees right for the second firing before the first man had hit the ground. Both guns went silent. Overwatch Stone, that was exceptional shooting. We're moving. Elena displaced again, but she was running out of positions. The ridgeline only offered so many angles, so many places where she could set up without silhouetting herself against the sky. And the enemy was learning, starting to predict her movements, concentrating fire on likely sniper positions. Rounds snapped past her head close enough to feel the pressure wave. Rock chips peppered her face. She pressed deeper into cover, waiting for the barrage to pass. Through the chaos, she heard Garrett's voice on the radio, calm and clear. All elements were going up. Overwatch is on the northern ridge, approximately 900 meters above Hammer 1's position. We're going to extract her. Elena's stomach dropped. Negative, Colonel. Do not compromise your mission for That wasn't a request, Overwatch. You saved my men. Now we're coming to get you. She wanted to argue, to order them to complete their primary mission and leave her. But she'd burned her Ghost Protocol status the moment she fired that first shot. There was no extraction for rogue operators, no backup, no support. She was alone on a mountain with an enemy force that now knew exactly where she was and wanted her dead. The choice was simple: accept help or die on this ridge. Copy that, Colonel. I'll keep them off your back. What followed was the most intense 20 minutes of Elena's life. She held the ridgeline alone while Garrett's team climbed, providing covering fire that kept enemy heads down and enemy movements cautious. Her ammunition counter dropped steadily. 30 rounds, 25, 20. Each shot had to count because there was no resupply, no backup magazines, no margin for error. The enemy tried 3 times to rush her position. She broke each assault with precision fire, making them pay in blood for every meter they advanced. They learned to fear her, to hesitate before exposing themselves, to move in short, frantic bursts that disrupted their coordination. But they kept coming, and she was one person against 40. 15 rounds left. Through her scope, she saw Garrett's team making progress up the mountainside, using speed and aggression to overcome the brutal terrain. They moved like the professionals. They were covering each other's movement, choosing routes that provided concealment. But the enemy saw them too. Fighters began breaking off from the main force, climbing to intercept. Elena shifted her focus, picking off climbers before they could establish positions above Garrett's team. It was like playing three-dimensional chess with bullets calculating angles and timing, and which threat needed to be eliminated first. 10 rounds left. An enemy fighter appeared 30 meters downslope from her position, closer than anyone had gotten. He'd flanked during her last displacement, circled around to her blindside. Smart, disciplined, deadly. Elena dropped her rifle and drew her sidearm in one smooth motion, fired 3 times before he could bring his weapon to bear. The range was point blank, the outcome certain. He tumbled backward down the slope. She retrieved her rifle, checked her surroundings with heightened paranoia. How many more had gotten close? How many were converging on her position right now? The radio crackled. Overwatch Stone, we're 60 seconds out from your position. Prepare for link-up. Elena glanced at her tactical display. The enemy was massing for another assault, this one designed to overrun her before Garrett arrived. They'd figured out the timing, realized they had a narrow window to eliminate her before reinforcements complicated the equation. She had 8 rounds left. 23 enemy fighters in the assault wave. The math didn't work. She keyed her radio. Colonel, I'm about to get hit hard. You need to hustle. Copy. 30 seconds. Elena settled behind her rifle one last time, selecting targets with cold calculation. She couldn't kill them all, but she could make them pause, make them second guess by the seconds Garrett needed to reach her. The first wave crested the ridgeline 50 meters away. She dropped the lead man, then the second, then the third. They scattered dove for cover but kept coming. Brave men, determined men. Men who would kill her if she gave them the chance. 5 rounds left. She fired again. Each shot perfect. Each shot necessary. Each shot buying time measured in heartbeats. 2 rounds left. The enemy was 20 meters away when she heard the most beautiful sound in the world. American voices shouting tactical commands. The distinctive crack of M4 carbines opening fire from her flank. Garrett's team hit the enemy assault like a sledgehammer, catching them in a crossfire that turned their attack into a slaughter. The survivors broke and ran scrambling back down the slope. Elena safed her weapon, her hands shaking now that the immediate crisis had passed. Adrenaline crash delayed reaction, the body's way of processing stress after the fact. Boots on rock. A figure appeared at the edge of her position, rifle up, scanning for threats. The muzzle lowered when he saw her. Colonel Garrett Stone looked exactly as Elena remembered, except for more gray in his hair and deeper lines around his eyes. 58 years old, built like an oak tree, with the weathered face of a man who'd spent 3 decades in every hellhole America sent its warriors. He wore the combat fatigues of a SEAL commander but moved with the smooth efficiency of someone half his age. His eyes went from her face to her rifle, recognition flashing across his features. Sergeant Elena Cross. Not a question, a statement. Been a long time. Elena stood pulling off her ghillie suit hood. 4 years, sir, Fort Benning. That's right, you were my best student that cycle. He gestured at the valley below where bodies lay scattered across rocks. I see you've been practicing. Just applying what you taught me, Colonel. Other operators appeared, establishing a defensive perimeter, checking sight lines, setting up fields of fire. Professional, efficient, lethal. Captain Derek Holland arrived last, slightly out of breath from the climb, his expression showing clear surprise when he saw Elena. Sir, that's a woman. That's Sergeant Cross, Garrett corrected, his tone allowing no discussion. And she just saved 12 of our men with some of the finest shooting I've ever witnessed. Derek recovered quickly. Ma'am, that was hell of a performance down there. Elena nodded acknowledgement but kept her attention on Garrett. Sir, I need to explain. Your Ghost Protocol, he interrupted, and you broke operational security to provide fire support, which means your career just ended and whoever runs Ghost Protocol is probably drafting termination orders as we speak. Yes, sir. Garrett studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that suggested he'd just made a decision that would cause headaches for people he didn't particularly like. Well then, Sergeant Cross, I suppose you're with us now. SEALs have a saying, we don't leave our people behind. And as of 5 minutes ago, when you saved 24 American lives, you became our people. Elena felt something shift in her chest, some weight she'd been carrying since Kate's death easing just slightly. Sir, I appreciate that, but Ghost Protocol can take it up with Nav Spec War Command, Garrett said flatly. You're under my operational authority now. Anyone has a problem with that, they can file a complaint. After we get off this mountain. He keyed his radio. All elements stone. We have Overwatch, consolidating position for extract. QRF2, what's your status? The response crackled back, stone QRF2. We're encountering heavy resistance at the valley entrance. Enemy has reorganized, and they're not backing down. Garrett glanced at Elena, then at the valley below. The enemy forces were regrouping, pulling back from their scattered positions, coalescing into a more organized defensive line. They weren't retreating, they were preparing for something. How many? Garrett asked. Elena glassed the valley with her scope counting, assessing, calculating. 60 fighters, possibly more in reserve. They're setting up crew-served weapons, establishing interlocking fields of fire. Professional deployment, sir. This isn't a rabble. These are trained soldiers. I was afraid you'd say that. Garrett pulled out his tactical map, spreading it on a rock. Cross, you've been observing this area. What's your assessment? Elena studied the map, comparing it to what she'd seen during her 6-hour vigil. The valley's a kill box for anyone trying to approach or extract conventionally. They chose this location specifically because it limits our options. Helicopters would be vulnerable to man-portable air defense. Ground vehicles can't navigate the terrain. We're on foot in hostile territory, and they have the numbers. Derek leaned over the map. So what do we do, Colonel? Garrett looked at Elena. That's why I'm asking our resident terrain expert. Cross, you've been mapping this area for Ghost Protocol. Where's our exit? Elena traced a route with her finger, highlighting a narrow ravine that cut through the northern slope. Here, the Serpent's Throat. It's a natural choke point that channels movement, but it also limits their ability to flank us. Narrow enough that superior numbers become a liability. Rocky enough that vehicles can't follow. And it leads where north for 2 kilometers opens onto a plateau where helicopters can land safely out of range of man-portable missiles. Garrett studied the route, his tactical mind processing angles and risks. It's defensible. If we control the key positions, yes, sir, I've mapped every meter of it. Then that's our route. He folded the map. Cross, you're on point. Holland, spread the word. We move in 5 minutes. As Derek moved off to brief the team, Garrett turned to Elena with an expression that mixed approval and concern. You know what you just did back there? Saved some lives, I hope. You did that, but you also painted a target on yourself. Whoever's running this operation, they know there's a sniper on this mountain who's killing their men with precision they can't counter. They're going to hunt you specifically. Elena checked her rifle, ejected the magazine, confirmed the round count. 2 rounds left, plus a full magazine in her pack. 22 rounds total. Let them try, sir. Garrett's smile returned, grim and approving. That's what I like to hear. Welcome back to the real world, Sergeant Cross. It's good to have you with us. As the team prepared to move, Elena took one last look at the valley below. Somewhere down there, among the enemy forces reorganizing for another assault, was the architect of this ambush. Someone who'd known SEAL Team 12 would be here. Someone who'd prepared a trap with professional precision. Someone who'd just learned that their carefully planned operation had an unexpected variable. Her. The radio crackled with a new voice, accented, confident, and chillingly familiar from intelligence briefings she'd reviewed during Ghost Protocol training. American Sniper, I know you're listening. My name is Dmitry Volkov. You've killed 18 of my men today. Impressive shooting, but this mountain has many more bodies before this is over. Come down now, and I will let your SEAL friends live. Refuse, and I will kill them one by one while you watch through your precious scope. Elena keyed her radio before Garrett could respond. Volkov, this is Overwatch. You want me? Come and get me, but bring a lot of body bags. You are going to need them. She released the transmit button and looked at Garrett, who was watching her with an expression somewhere between concern and admiration. Sir, I should probably mention something about our opponent. Let me guess, you know who Volkov is? Former Russian Spetsnaz, war criminal, runs a private military company that operates in legal gray zones. Ghost Protocol has been tracking him for 2 years. She paused. He's also the man who killed my partner 18 months ago in Syria. Garrett absorbed this information, his expression hardening. This just got personal. It was always personal, sir. I just didn't know it until now. Can you stay professional? Because if this is about revenge, it's about justice, Elena interrupted, and completing the mission. Revenge is sloppy. Justice is precise. You taught me that. Garrett held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. All right, then. Let's go introduce Mr. Volkov to American Precision. The team moved out, Elena on point, leading them toward the Serpent's Throat ravine and whatever waited in its shadows. Behind them, the valley echoed with the sounds of an enemy force preparing for war. Ahead, the mountain loomed dark and silent, hiding secrets that Ghost Protocol had mapped but never fully understood. And somewhere in between, Dmitry Volkov was planning his next move, unaware that the woman he was hunting had already decided how this story would end, with him dead and her promises to Kate Brennan finally kept. The Serpent's Throat earned its name honestly. Elena led the column into the ravine's mouth where ancient water and ice had carved a wound through the mountain's face. The walls rose 30 feet on either side, jagged rock that would shred anyone trying to climb under fire. The passage narrowed in places to barely shoulder width, then opened into chambers where boulders the size of houses created natural defensive positions. She'd memorized every meter during 6 months of Ghost Protocol reconnaissance, every choke point, every line of sight, every place where geology became tactical advantage. The knowledge that made her valuable to her former handlers now belonged to the men following her into darkness. Garrett moved beside her, his M4 at low, ready eyes, scanning the high ground with the instinctive wariness of someone who'd survived 3 decades by never assuming safety. Behind them, the combined SEAL teams moved in tactical dispersion weapons outboard, each man covering a different sector. Talk to me, Cross, Garrett said quietly. What am I looking at? Elena gestured ahead where the ravine bent sharply left. First major choke point at 50 meters. The passage narrows to 4 feet, single file only. After that, it opens into a chamber maybe 30 meters across. That's where we need to make our first stand if they push us. Defensibility. Good fields of fire, limited approaches, natural cover. We could hold it against 3 times our number if we set up correctly. Derek Holland appeared at Garrett's other shoulder, slightly winded from the pace Elena had set. Colonel QRF-2 reports heavy contact at the valley entrance. They're pulling back to secondary positions. Casualties. 2 wounded, none critical, but Volkov's forces are pressing hard. They want us contained in this ravine. Garrett glanced at Elena. That concern you? Yes, sir, they're hurting us, which means either they know something about this terrain we don't, or they're planning something ahead of us. Your assessment, Elena had been thinking about this since they entered the ravine. Ghost Protocol mapped this entire area during Cold War site surveys. If they know our intel, they know what's here. Which is, she stopped walking, turned to face Garrett directly. Sir, there's something you need to see. 30 meters ahead, north wall. I need 5 minutes. Garrett studied her face, reading something in her expression. He'd always been good at that, even when she was a student trying to hide doubt or fear or pain. He saw through the tactical mask to whatever truth lived underneath. Holland, hold the column here. Establish security. Cross and I are doing a recon. They moved forward together, Elena leading, until she reached a section of wall where rockfall had created a natural camouflage. To anyone passing by, it looked like random geological debris. But Ghost Protocol had trained her to recognize patterns, anomalies, signs of human intervention disguised as nature. She pulled away stones, carefully arranged to appear random. Behind them, darkness opened into worked stone, a tunnel carved with machine precision. Soviet engineering, Garrett said, recognizing the style immediately. How old? 1983. Ghost Protocol has been cataloging these sites for 40 years. Elena pulled a small flashlight from her kit, illuminated the passage. There are 47 confirmed weapons caches along the Colorado-Wyoming border. Legacy of Cold War contingency planning. If the balloon went up, Soviet forces were supposed to have resupply points scattered across strategic terrain. And this is one of them. Number 23. I memorized the inventory during my training. She moved into the tunnel, Garrett following, until the passage opened into a larger chamber. The flashlight beam swept across wooden crates stacked with military precision. Cyrillic markings identified contents in faded paint. The dry mountain air had preserved everything in near-perfect condition. Garrett approached the nearest crate, pried it open with his knife. Inside, nestled in protective foam, lay 4 RPG-7 launchers and a dozen warheads, their olive-drab paint showing minimal corrosion. Jesus Christ, he breathed. This is a full combat load for a company-sized element. Elena was already checking other crates. RGD-5 fragmentation grenades stable until 2030. PKM machine guns with ammunition. Dragunov sniper rifles. AK-74 variants. Enough small arms to equip 60 fighters. She pulled open another crate, revealing blocks of explosive material wrapped in protective fabric. Semtex, military grade. Still viable if stored correctly, which it appears to have been. Garrett ran calculations in his head, tactical possibilities multiplying. This changes the equation. We're not just defending anymore. We're equipped to counterattack. That's what I was thinking, sir. Elena closed the crate, turned to face him. But there's a problem. If I knew about this cache, then whoever leaked our Ghost Protocol survey data to Volkov knows about it too. Which means he's expecting us to find it, possibly planning to trap us here. Or he wants us to use these weapons. For some reason I can't figure out yet. They locked eyes in the dim tunnel, 2 tactical minds working the same problem from different angles. Garrett made his decision. We take what we can carry, RPGs, grenades, extra ammunition. But we don't linger. If this is a trap, we spring it on our terms, not his. 20 minutes later, the SEAL teams had redistributed their loadout. Every man carried extra magazines, grenades hanging from their kit like lethal fruit. 4 men shouldered RPG launchers, warheads secured in their packs. The Soviet weapons were old but functional, designed for reliability over refinement. Elena had claimed a Dragunov SVD, the Soviet counterpart to her American M210. Different weapon system, but the principles remained the same. She loaded it with practiced efficiency, testing the action, confirming the scope 0, with a quick bore sight. Derek approached Garrett as they prepared to move. Sir, this feels wrong. Everything we need just sitting here waiting for us. That's too convenient. Agreed, Garrett said, which is why Cross is going to tell us exactly how we're going to use this ravine to our advantage. Cross, Elena had been studying the terrain ahead, comparing what she saw to mental maps built from months of reconnaissance. She pulled out her tactical pad, brought up the ravine's topography overlaid with defensive positions she'd war-gamed during lonely nights and observation posts. Gather the team leads, she said. 5 minutes later, she was briefing squad leaders on natural choke points, fields of fire displacement roads. She spoke with confidence, born from intimate knowledge of terrain, pointing out features invisible to eyes that hadn't spent hundreds of hours studying every rock and shadow. 3 primary defensive positions, where she said, marking them on the map. Alpha at 50 meters where the ravine narrows. Bravo at 150 where the chamber opens. Charlie at 300, the final position before we reach the plateau. If they push us, we fall back in sequence. Alpha holds us till overwhelmed displaces to Bravo. Bravo absorbs Alpha's personnel holds until overwhelmed displaces to Charlie. Charlie is our last stand position. If we lose Charlie, we have nowhere left to go. Garrett listened, nodding approval at her tactical acumen. Weapons placement, RPGs at Bravo and Charlie. The chambers are wide enough for backblast clearance. Machine guns at all 3 positions, interlocking fire. Grenades deployed at choke points as force multipliers. She looked up from the map. Colonel, I recommend you take Bravo with the main element. I'll take Charlie with a 4-man marksman team. Long-range interdiction on advancing forces. You're isolating yourself at the deepest position. I'm putting our precision fire where it can do the most damage for the longest time. If they break through Alpha and Bravo, I'll have clear shots on their advance the entire way. Derek shook his head. That makes you the last line of defense with 4 men against potentially 40-plus enemies. Elena met his gaze steadily. Captain Holland, I held a ridge line alone against similar odds 2 hours ago. With 4 good shooters, I can hold Charlie until extraction arrives or we run out of ammunition. Whichever comes first. Garrett studied her, reading the determination in her posture. You're sure about this? Yes, sir. This is the right play. Then we do it your way. He raised his voice to address all the team leads. You heard Sergeant Cross. She knows this terrain better than anyone. We execute her plan. Questions? There were none. Or if there were, the men kept them private. Elena's shooting demonstration on the mountain had earned their respect. Now Garrett's trust elevated that respect to confidence. They moved deeper into the serpent's throat, each man hyper-aware that somewhere behind them, Volkov's forces were organizing pursuit. The question wasn't if they'd come. It was when and in what strength, and whether Elena's defensive plan could hold against professional soldiers who'd already proven their competence. The answer came 30 minutes later. Contact rear. The call echoed through the ravine, followed by the sharp crack of M4 fire. The rear guard had spotted enemy scouts probing their back trail. Volkov wasn't waiting for them to dig in. He was pushing immediately, trying to catch them in movement, destroy them before they could establish coherent defense. All elements double-time to defensive positions. Garrett's command sent the column into controlled urgency, weapons discipline maintained even as they moved faster. Elena reached Charlie position and immediately began directing her marksman team. U2 elevated positions on the west wall. U2 east wall firing ports. Interlocking fire lanes of responsibility. Nobody shoots until I give the command. The Dragunov felt foreign in her hands compared to her beloved M210, but the fundamentals remained constant. She ranged key landmarks, noted wind indicators, calculated holds for various distances. Muscle memory and training transcended specific weapon systems. Through the scope, she watched Garrett's element fortifying Bravo position. They moved with efficiency born from countless repetitions, creating interlocking fields of fire, positioning RPG teams with clear backblast areas, setting claymore mines at the choke point approaches. The radio crackled. Charlie Bravo, we're set. Alpha reports enemy forces massing at ravine entrance. Estimate 45 to 50 fighters. They're bringing crew-served weapons. Elena keyed her mic. Bravo Charlie copies. We're ready. Let them come. The waiting was always the hardest part. Minutes stretched like hours as the enemy organized their assault. Elena used the time to refine her range cards, identify priority targets, prepare her mind for the violence ahead. She thought about Kate, who taught her that the moments before combat were for letting go of everything except the mission. Fear, doubt, regret, all of it had to be compartmentalized, sealed away, examined later if later ever came. They're coming, someone reported over the radio. Elena pressed her eye to the scope, scanning the ravine's entrance 300 meters distant. Movement, shadows resolving into men with weapons advancing in fire teams, using cover intelligently. Professional soldiers, just like she'd assessed. The lead elements reached Alpha position, and the world exploded into sound and fury. The SEALs at Alpha opened fire with disciplined bursts, aiming shots rather than spraying ammunition. The enemy returned fire, but the narrow approach limited their ability to mass firepower. Bodies fell, others pulled back, regrouped, tried different angles. Elena watched through her scope, reading the battle's rhythm, waiting for her moment. The enemy was focused on Alpha, hammering the position with everything they had. They didn't yet realize the trap was three-layered. A group of fighters tried to flank left, climbing the ravine's wall to get above Alpha position. Bad idea. Target left 11 o'clock, 280 meters. Elena called to her team. 3 climbers, on my shot. She settled the Dragunov's reticle on the lead climber, exhaled, halfway pressed the trigger. The rifle bucked differently than her M210, but the result was the same. The climber fell. Her team engaged the other 2 in rapid succession. All 3 bodies tumbled down the rock face. The enemy adjusted, stopped trying to climb, concentrated on frontal assault. They were learning, adapting, probing for weaknesses with grim determination. Alpha position held for 6 minutes before Garrett ordered the withdrawal. The SEALs displaced under covering fire, leaving claymore mines with command detonation, creating a temporary barrier of steel and explosive. The enemy rushed the abandoned position, and Garrett had triggered the claymores. The ravine channeled the blast, magnifying its effects. The screams echoed off stone walls. When the smoke cleared, 13 enemy fighters lay dead or dying. The survivors pulled back, regrouping for another attempt. Alpha elements consolidating at Bravo, Garrett reported. Good shooting from Charlie. You took pressure off our displacement. Copy that, Elena responded. Assess their tactics. They're professional but predictable. They'll try the same flanking maneuver at Bravo. Agreed, we're ready for it. The second assault came 20 minutes later, and Elena had been right. The enemy tried to climb around Bravo position, using the wider chamber to spread out, present multiple targets. She and her team picked them apart methodically. 5 climbers became 5 corpses. The enemy learned that lesson too. They shifted tactics again, this time coordinating a frontal assault with suppressive fire from crew-served machine guns. The heavy weapons hammered Bravo position, forcing the defenders to keep their heads down while assault teams advanced undercover. Smart, coordinated, deadly if it worked. Elena identified the machine gun positions through her scope. 2 PKM guns set up at the ravine's entrance, belted ammunition feeding through muzzles flashing as they poured fire toward Bravo. Charlie 2 and 3 machine guns at entrance, range 300 meters. Engage on my mark. She settled her crosshairs on the right side gunner, compensated for wind and angle fired. The gunner slumped over his weapon. Her team engaged the second gun. 2 shots, 2 hits. Both machine guns went silent. The enemy assault team, suddenly exposed without suppressive fire, broke and ran back to cover. More bodies littered the ravine floor. Charlie Bravo, outstanding work. You just saved us from getting overrun. Elena allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Her defensive plan was working. 300 meters of ravine had become a killing ground where superior enemy numbers meant nothing, where terrain and marksmanship trumped aggression. But she knew this couldn't last forever. They had finite ammunition. The enemy had time and reinforcements. Eventually, mathematics would favor the larger force. Her radio crackled with a new voice, one she recognized from intelligence briefings and earlier taunts. American sniper, you fight well, but you cannot win. I have 80 men now. You have perhaps 25. I have unlimited ammunition. You have what you carry. I have time. You have extraction helicopters. That cannot land under fire. Dmitry Volkov paused, letting his words sink in. I know who you are now, Elena Cross. Ghost Protocol Operator. Lone survivor of the Syria operation. Tell me, does Kate Brennan's death still haunt your dreams? Elena's blood turned to ice. Her finger tightened involuntarily on the trigger. Volkov continued, his voice carrying casual cruelty. I planned that ambush myself. Bought the intelligence from your own command structure. Your Kate, she fought bravely at the end. Killed 3 of my men before the bullets found her. But she died slowly, crying for help that never came. I heard her last words over the radio her spotter carried. She called your name. Again and again. Where were you, Elena? Why didn't you save her? The scope's view blurred. Elena realized her hands were shaking, rage threatening to shatter the professional calm she'd maintained. A hand touched her shoulder. Garrett had moved up to Charlie position that during the lull recognized the danger signs. Cross, he said quietly, firmly. Don't listen. He's trying to make you sloppy, make you emotional. Classic psychological warfare. He killed Kate. Elena whispered, her voice raw. He bought our mission intel and used it to kill her. I know, and we'll make him pay for it, but not by losing control, not by making mistakes. Garrett moved to where she could see him without leaving the scope. Look at me. She did. I lost 6 men in Desert Storm, he said. February 26, 1991. Friendly fire incident because someone misread coordinates. All 6 dead in 30 seconds. I wanted to burn the world down. Wanted to find whoever made that mistake and kill them with my bare hands. He paused, making sure she was listening. But my team needed me focused, not enraged. The mission needed me professional, not personal. So I took that pain, that rage, that need for revenge, and I locked it away. Told myself I'd deal with it after the mission, after my men were safe, after the objective was complete. His voice softened slightly. You can hate Volkov. You can want him dead. That's human and justified. But right now, 24 Americans are counting on you to keep your head clear and your shots true. Kate would want you focused on saving lives, not losing yourself in revenge. Elena breathed slowly, pushing back against the red haze threatening her vision. Garrett was right. He was always right about these things. How do you do it, sir? How do you separate the professional from the personal? You don't. You just decide which one serves the mission better at any given moment. He squeezed her shoulder. Kate's death was personal, but keeping these men alive, that's personal too. Channel everything into that. Make her death mean something by ensuring it's the last time following bad orders gets good people killed. Elena nodded slowly, feeling control return the tactical mind, reasserting itself over the emotional heart. Thank you, sir. Thank me by making your next shot count. He released her shoulder, keyed his radio. All elements, Bravo. Volkov is running psychological operations. Ignore anything you hear from him. Stay focused on the mission. Volkov's voice returned mocking now. Touching speech, Colonel Stone. But it changes nothing. You're trapped. I'm patient. And eventually you'll run out of ammunition or time. Probably both. Elena keyed her mic, her voice steady again, cold as the mountain air. Volkov, this is Cross. You killed 18 of my men on the ridge, 13 more at Alpha, 5 at the climbs, 7 more at Bravo. That's 43 body bags you need to fill before you even reach me. Kate died for bad intel. Your men are dying because you're too arrogant to realize you already lost. The only question is how many more die before you accept it. Silence on the radio. Then, we'll see, Elena Cross, we'll see. The transmission ended. Garrett looked at her with something approaching approval. Feeling better? Getting there, sir. Good, because I think they're about to try something different. He was right. The third assault came with darkness falling, the enemy using thermal optics and night vision to advance under reduced visibility. They moved in smaller teams, infiltrating rather than assaulting, trying to get close before the defenders could react. But Elena had thermal optics 2 requisitioned from the Soviet cache. The Dragunov scope cut through darkness revealed heat signatures as clearly as daylight revealed bodies. She hunted them through the night, patient and methodical, each shot carefully placed. Her marksman team followed her lead, turning the ravine into a gauntlet where darkness provided no safety. The enemy learned that lesson too eventually. They pulled back, regrouped again, tried to figure out how to crack a defensive position that seemed to anticipate every move. As midnight approached, an eerie quiet settled over the Serpent's throat. Both sides exhausted, both sides calculating, both sides knowing the real battle was still ahead. Garrett moved between positions, checking on his men, redistributing ammunition, providing the leadership that kept morale intact despite impossible circumstances. He found Elena at Charlie, still behind her scope, still watching. Status: ammunition at 40%, teams holding up, no casualties yet at this position. She glanced at him. What's our extraction timeline? Helicopters can be overhead in 2 hours, but they can't land while Volkov controls the high ground around the plateau. So we have to break his force, push them back far enough to create a safe landing zone. That's the mission. Elena did calculations in her head, tactical possibilities and probabilities. Sir, I have an idea, but you're really not going to like it. Garrett settled beside her, his weathered face showing the exhaustion of a long day's combat. I'm listening. And in the darkness of the Serpent's throat, Elena Cross outlined a plan that would either save them all or get them killed. Garrett listened, asked questions, pointed out flaws, and finally nodded agreement. Because sometimes the only way out was through. And sometimes through meant going straight at the enemy's strongest point with everything you had left. Dawn came to the Serpent's throat with the color of old bruises, purple and gray, bleeding into reluctant light. Elena had been awake for 26 hours, her body running on adrenaline and the stubborn will that had kept her alive through situations that should have killed her a dozen times over. Her optics revealed the enemy forces reorganizing at the ravine's entrance. They'd learned respect during the night. 43 of their comrades lay dead or dying in the narrow passage. The survivors moved with the cautious efficiency of men who discovered that superior numbers meant nothing against superior position. But Volkov wasn't retreating. He was adapting. Elena spotted the mortar team setting up 1,200 meters distant, well beyond effective rifle range positioning, behind cover that would make them nearly impossible to hit. 282mm mortars, Soviet-made, the kind that could rain indirect fire onto defensive positions and turn fortifications into death traps. She keyed her radio. Bravo, Charlie, I have enemy mortar teams establishing firing positions. Range 1250 meters, bearing 087. If they dial in our coordinates, we're done. Garrett's response came immediately. Can you neutralize them? Elena ran calculations automatically, the mathematics of death rendered in windage and elevation. 1,250 meters. Moving targets. Dawnlight creating mirage and thermal distortion. With her Dragunov, she had 3 magazines left, 60 rounds of 7.62 by 54 mm. Her M210 sat secured to her pack, its remaining 20 rounds reserved for impossible shots. Her M4 carbine held 4 magazines, 120 rounds of 5.56 for close work. She'd made harder shots before, but not many and never after 26 hours without sleep. "I can try, sir." "That's not a yes or no, Sergeant." She thought about Kate, about promises made, and kept about men whose lives depended on whether she could make an impossible shot under impossible conditions. "It's a yes, sir, because I don't miss twice." Garrett moved up to Charlie position, settling beside her with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent 3 decades in places where one wrong move meant death. "What do you need?" "Spotting data. Confirm my range calculation, watch for wind shifts. I'll have maybe 3 shots before they get their tubes operational and start dropping rounds on our heads." He pulled out his rangefinder, lays the target. 1247 meters, call it 1250 even. Elena adjusted her scope dialing elevation to account for the extreme distance. The Dragunov wasn't designed for shots this long. It was a designated marksman rifle effective to 800 meters in ideal conditions. She was asking it to reach nearly twice that far. But sometimes you worked with what you had, and physics was physics, regardless of the weapon system. "Wind?" she asked. Garrett observed the valley reading signs invisible to untrained eyes. 14 miles per hour quartering left, gusting to 16. Temperature? -12 Celsius, humidity 28%. Elena made mental calculations, adjusted her hold, compensated for the Coriolis effect at this range for the spin drift that would push her bullet right for every variable that separated hitting from missing. The reticles settled on the mortar team leader, directing his men. Professional soldiers setting up their weapon with practiced efficiency. In 90 seconds, maybe less, they'd have the mortar operational and start dropping rounds. "First shot on the team leader," she said. "He's directing the setup. Kill him, they'll lose cohesion." "Roger, wind just gusted, holding at 16 now." Elena controlled her breathing, forcing her heart rate down despite the altitude, despite the exhaustion, despite everything screaming at her that this shot was beyond her capabilities. Kate's voice echoed in memory. "The hard shots are what separate good snipers from great ones. Good snipers know their limits. Great snipers redefine what limits mean." Elena's finger settled on the trigger. The world narrowed to the scope's view, to the crosshairs bisecting a human being 1,250 meters away, to the space between heartbeats, where stillness transformed into action. 3, 2, 1, shot. The Dragunov bucked against her shoulder. She watched the bullet's flight in eternity compressed into 1.6 seconds. The mortar team leader's head snapped back. He collapsed across the tube dead before his body understood it should fall. "Kill," Garrett confirmed. "Hell of a shot, Cross." But there was no time for celebration. The second operator rushed to take over, dragging his team leader's body aside, hands moving toward the mortar's controls. Elena was already cycling the Dragunov's bolt, chambering another round, reacquiring the target. The second operator was moving, making himself a harder target, learning from his predecessor's death. She led his movement, calculated where he'd be when the bullet arrived, adjusted for wind that had shifted again. "Wind holding 16, slight decrease," Garrett reported. Elena fired. The magnified view showed the bullet impact 4 inches high, missing the operator's head by a margin that might as well have been a mile. He dove for cover, the mortar temporarily abandoned. "Miss," she said flatly, already chambering her third round. 2 shots left in this magazine. If she couldn't neutralize the mortar with these, they'd be taking indirect fire within minutes. A third operator emerged, sprinting toward the tube, clearly determined to get it operational regardless of the sniper fire. Brave man, dedicated soldier, about to die for his commitment. Elena settled herself, pushed away. Fatigue pushed away, doubt pushed away, everything except the fundamental truth that had defined her life since Kate's death. She didn't miss twice. The world reduced to breathing, to the gentle pressure of her finger, to the perfect stillness before the shot. Kate's last words echoed. "Promise me, never stay silent again." "This one's for you, Elena whispered. The Dragunov fired. The third operator dropped mid-stride, his momentum carrying him forward to collapse across the mortar tube. The weapon tipped, fell, rendered inoperable by the weight of a dead man. "Kill confirmed," Garrett said. "Mortar neutralized, an outstanding shooting cross." Elena saved her weapon, allowed herself one shaky breath. 3 shots at 1,250 meters. 2 kills, 1 destroyed weapon system. In her entire career, she'd never pushed the Dragunov that far. The radio crackled with Derek's voice from Bravo position. Charlie Bravo, that was incredible. You just saved our asses. Again. But Elena was already scanning for the next threat because the battle wasn't over. Volkov had more assets, more men, more determination to finish what he'd started. She found what she was looking for immediately. Smoke grenades detonating at the ravine's entrance, thick gray clouds billowing through the passage, obscuring vision, negating her long-range advantage. Bravo, Charlie. Smoke attack inbound. They're coming under cover. Copy. All elements thermal optics. Switch to close-range weapons. This is going to get personal. The enemy poured through the smoke in coordinated teams advancing under covering fire from positions Elena couldn't see through the obscuration. They'd learned their lessons, adapted their tactics, evolved their approach to counter-American precision. This wasn't going to be a sniper battle anymore. This was going to be close-quarters brutality, the kind of fighting where training and violence met in equal measure. Elena slung the Dragunov, pulled her M4 carbine to high ready. Her marksman team did likewise, preparing for enemies that would be meters away rather than hundreds. The assault hit Bravo position like a sledgehammer, the narrow confines of the ravine, amplifying sound until the gunfire became physical pressure against eardrums. Elena watched through her thermal optic as Garrett's team met the attack with disciplined fire holding, ground extracting casualties and blood. But the enemy kept coming, pushing through their own dead, accepting horrific losses to gain meters of ground. Whoever Volkov was paying these men, they were earning every dollar. The firefight intensified. Elena saw muzzle flashes through smoke, heard the distinctive crack of AK variants mixing with American M4s. The enemy was pushing hard on Bravo's left flank, trying to break through the defensive line. Then everything changed. A single rifle shot cracked louder than the rest, and Garrett's voice came over the radio, tight with pain. I'm hit. Shoulder. Elena's blood went cold. Colonel status. Through and through, right side. I'm combat ineffective on this arm. Derek's voice cut in. All elements fall back to Charlie. We need to evacuate the colonel. Negative. Garrett's voice carried absolute authority despite the pain. We hold here. If we abandon Bravo now, they'll overrun us before we can establish at Charlie. We hold this line. But Elena made a decision in the space of a single heartbeat, the kind of decision that changes everything. Captain Holland, she said, her voice carrying command authority she'd never used before. You're evacuating the colonel to Charlie with 3 men. I'm taking tactical command at Bravo. I'll hold with my marksman team until you're established. Then we displace. Cross that suicide, Derek started. That's an order, Captain. Elena looked through her optic toward where Garrett was positioned, though she couldn't see him through the smoke and chaos. Colonel Stone, you taught me that the best operator isn't the one who takes the shot. It's the one who makes the hard call when leadership is needed. This is my call. This is my command. Silence on the radio for 3 seconds that felt like hours. Then Garrett's voice strained, but carrying something that might have been pride. 2 minutes cross, you hold for 2 minutes, then you displace. That's my order. Don't make me regret teaching you about hard calls. Yes, sir. 2 minutes. I've got this. Elena moved forward to Bravo's defensive line, her M4 at high ready. Her 3-man marksman team followed without question. Derek met her at the position, his face streaked with powder residue and someone else's blood. The left flank, he said quickly. That's where they're concentrating. If you can hold them for 2 minutes while we get the colonel out. Go, Elena said. We've got the flank. Derek grabbed Garrett along with 2 other men supporting the colonel's weight. They moved back toward Charlie position, leaving Elena and her team alone at Bravo. She surveyed her new command. 3 men watching her, waiting for orders, trusting her with their lives in a moment that would define whether she was truly ready to lead. Listen up, Elena said, her voice cutting through the chaos. We're going to make these 2 minutes count. Sectors of fire. Martinez, left. Chencena Rodriguez, right. I'm floating, taking targets of opportunity. Conserve ammunition. Controlled bursts. Make every shot matter. We're not just holding a position, we're buying our brothers time to establish a defensive line that will keep all of us alive. Questions? And if they break through, Sergeant? Martinez asked. Elena chambered around in her M4, her voice steady as stone. Then we make them pay in blood for every meter. And they'll find out that one angry woman with our rifle is worth 10 men who think she's easy prey. The enemy came through the smoke, like shadows solidifying into flesh, their assault coordinated and aggressive. But Elena and her team were ready. They met the attack with precision fire, turning the left flank into a kill box. Elena moved between firing positions, never staying static, creating the illusion of a larger force. She called targets, directed fire, maintained tactical awareness, while engaging enemies that appeared through smoke at ranges measured in meters rather than hundreds. Martinez, 2 o'clock 10 meters. Rodriguez, suppressive fire on that boulder cluster. Chen, displacement to secondary position now. She was everywhere at once, her mind processing tactical information with crystalline clarity despite exhaustion. This was what Garrett had been training her for all along, not just to make impossible shots, but to lead men in impossible situations. 60 seconds elapsed. The enemy assault was faltering, their casualties mounting, their advance stalling against defensive fire that seemed to come from everywhere. 90 seconds. Elena's M4 ran dry. She dropped the magazine, loaded a fresh one, resumed firing without breaking rhythm. Her remaining ammunition, 3 magazines for the M4, 60 rounds. The Dragunov had 2 mags left, 40 rounds. Her M210 still had its 20 precision rounds. It would have to be enough. 120 seconds. Derek's voice crackled over the radio. Cross, we're established at Charlie. Displaced now. Elena pulled smoke grenades from her kit, deployed them to cover her team's withdrawal. All elements tactical displacement. Bounds of 2. Martinez and Rodriguez, you're first. Move. They fell back in perfect coordination, 2 moving, while 2 covered professional and precise, even as enemy fire chased them through the ravine. The smoke provided concealment, but the enemy was learning firing into likely displacement routes. A bullet snapped past Elena's head, close enough to feel the pressure wave. She returned fire drop. The shooter continued moving. They reached Charlie position with 0 casualties, collapsing into the defensive line as the main element provided covering fire. Elena dropped behind cover, breathing hard, checking her team. All present, all functional. Mission accomplished. Garrett was propped against a rock, his shoulder properly bandaged. Now his face pale from blood loss, but his eyes sharp. He caught her gaze, nodded once. No words needed. She'd made the call, held the line, brought her team home. Derek appeared beside her. That was some of the finest rearguard action I've ever witnessed. You just bought us the time we needed to establish this position properly. Just doing what needed doing, sir. No, Garrett said, his voice carrying despite the pain. You did what few people could do. There's a difference. But there was no time for congratulations. The radio crackled with a transmission on the enemy frequency, Volkov's voice carrying across the tactical net. Colonel Stone, Elena Cross. I must admit I'm impressed. You've cost me 68 men so far. More than I anticipated, losing to 25 Americans. But mathematics remain mathematics. You have finite ammunition. I have reinforcements arriving. You have 30 minutes until helicopters. I have surface-to-air missiles to shoot them down. Tell me, how does this end in your favor? Elena's blood went cold. Man-pads, man-portable air defense systems. If Volkov had those, the helicopters would be flying into a death trap. She met Garrett's eyes, saw the same realization reflected despite his weakened state. Sir, we need eyes on anti-aircraft positions. Now. You're our eyes cross. Where would he position them? Elena pulled up her mental map of the terrain, identified likely locations. High ground overlooking the plateau, northeast elevation, approximately 850 meters from our position. Perfect angle on helicopter approach vectors. Can you spot it from here? Elena moved to a firing position with clear view of the plateau, began scanning with her optic. The dawn light was strengthening now, burning away shadows, revealing the mountain in harsh detail. She found what she was looking for. A team of 4 men setting up a firing position on the elevation, assembling something that could only be a SA-7 Grail, the Soviet version of the Stinger missile. Shoulder-fired heat-seeking, perfectly capable of swatting helicopters from the sky. And Dmitry Volkov himself was manning the weapon, supervising its setup with personal attention to detail. I have eyes on the man pad, she reported. Range 880 meters. Partial cover. Target is mobile, setting up the system now. She paused, her voice dropping. Volkov's on the launcher, sir. Garrett pulled himself up straighter despite the pain, his tactical mind still sharp. That's your shot, Cross. But that's also extreme range after 30 hours of operations. Can you make it? Elena thought about the 1250-meter shot on the mortar team, thought about every impossible shot she'd made today, thought about her body's state after the longest sustained operation of her career. Her hands were shaking slightly. Her vision occasionally blurred from exhaustion. Her right shoulder throbbed from the dislocation she'd suffered on the ridge. Every part of her body was screaming that this shot was beyond her current capabilities. But she was Elena Cross. She didn't miss when it mattered. Yes, sir. I can make it. She retrieved her M210 from her pack, the familiar weight settling into her hands like coming home. This was her weapon, her tool, her extension of will across impossible distances. 20 rounds remaining. One shot was all she'd need. Elena settled into her final firing position, building a stable platform from available cover. She ranged the target with her laser. 881 meters. Extreme range, but well within the M210's capabilities under ideal conditions. These weren't ideal conditions. Wind had picked up with the dawn, 16 miles per hour, gusting to 18. Cross breeze from the northeast, pushing her shot pattern right. Volkov was moving, checking the manpad's alignment, making himself a constantly shifting target. The helicopter pilots were reporting inbound 12 minutes out, approaching fast and low to minimize exposure time. If she didn't make this shot, they'd fly straight into missile fire. Elena began her breathing cycle, forcing her body into stillness. Despite every screaming nerve, despite the exhaustion, despite the weight of lives depending on her ability to make one more perfect shot, Kate's face appeared in her mind. Not dying this time, but alive, smiling the way she'd looked during their first training operation together. Justice, not revenge, Kate had said once during a long night in a Syrian safe house. Revenge is about making yourself feel better. Justice is about making sure what happened to you doesn't happen to someone else. Elena understood now. This shot wasn't about revenge for Kate's death. It was about ensuring 24 Americans went home to their families. It was about proving that speaking up, breaking protocol, doing the right thing despite orders could save lives. It was about justice. Garrett's voice came quietly from behind her. Cross, you have proven in everything today. You don't need this shot to validate your worth. Yes, I do, sir. Not for me. For every operator who died because someone silenced the truth. For Kate. For everyone who's ever been told to stay quiet when they knew command was wrong. This shot ends that cycle. She settled the crosshairs on Volkov's chest, tracked his movement, predicted where he'd be when the bullet arrived. The calculation was instinctive now, mathematical certainty born from 10,000 practice shots. Wind steady at 17, Garrett reported. No gusts, helicopters 10 minutes out. Elena exhaled, halfway held it, found the space between heartbeats where the world stood still. Volkov raised his head, looking toward the ravine, and for one moment through the scope, Elena swore he was looking directly at her. Across 880 meters across the morning light, across the divide between hunter and hunted. Her finger touched the trigger. Pressure began to build. Then her vision blurred. The crosshairs wavered. Her hands, steady for 30 hours through impossible stress, finally betrayed her. The exhaustion, the damaged shoulder, the dehydration, the continuous operations without rest, all of it crashed down in a single moment of physiological failure. Elena blinked hard, trying to clear her vision, trying to steady her hands. But her body was done. It had given everything, and now it had nothing left. She pressed the trigger anyway. The M210 bucked against her shoulder. Through the scope, she tracked the bullet's flight, felt in her bones that something was wrong. The bullet impacted 6 inches left of Volkov's head, sparking off the rock behind him. Miss, Elena's world stopped. In 10 years of shooting through thousands of rounds, downrange hundreds of missions, she'd never missed a shot that mattered this badly. And now Volkov was alive, the manpad was operational, and helicopters were 8 minutes inbound. Cross, Garrett's voice carried concern. Elena's hands were shaking violently now, the scope's view blurring with tears and exhaustion and the crushing weight of failure. She'd promised she didn't miss twice, but her body was betraying her muscle failure, and neural exhaustion combining to rob her of the precision that defined her. I, I can't make the shot, sir. The admission tasted like failure, like every promise broken, like Kate dying all over again because Elena wasn't good enough when it mattered most. My hands won't steady. I'm done. Through the scope, she watched Volkov shouldering the man-pad tracking toward the incoming helicopters. In seconds, 24 Americans would die because she couldn't make one shot. Garrett moved smoothly beside her despite his wounded shoulder, his M4 coming up. Derek appeared on her other side, his rifle raised. Then we do this together, Garrett said, his voice firm but kind. Cross, you've carried this team for 30 hours. Now let your team carry you. Give me your range data. Quick. Elena forced her tactical mind to override the emotional collapse. This was what teams did. This was why lone wolves died alone. This was the lesson she'd been learning since the moment Garrett climbed a mountain to bring her home. 881 meters, wind 17 right to left. Target is shouldering weapon facing 270 degrees. Her voice steadied as she shifted from shooter to spotter. Compensation for M4 at this range, aim 12 inches high, 6 inches left. He's stabilizing now, preparing to fire. Derek's voice was calm. Colonel, simultaneous engagement. Affirmative. Cross-call it. Elena watched Volkov through her scope, tracked his movement, calculated the moment, even though she couldn't take the shot herself. Her hands still shook, but her mind remained sharp. This was what she could still give. Target is stabilizing. Finger moving to trigger. Stand by. Stand by. Volkov's posture shifted, the man-pad tracking the incoming helicopters. Fire! Garrett and Derek fired simultaneously, their M4s cracking in tandem. Elena watched through her scope as both rounds impacted one, catching Volkov in the shoulder, spinning him, the second punching through his chest. The man-pad fired, but Volkov's death grip sent the missile spiraling wild. It detonated harmlessly against the mountainside, a brilliant flash in thunder that marked the end of a threat that would never touch American aircraft. Volkov collapsed, the launcher falling from his hands, his body tumbling down the rock face. Kill confirmed, Elena whispered, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, sir. Both of you. I failed and you didn't fail. Garrett lowered his rifle, wincing as the movement pulled his wounded shoulder. You made 30 hours of impossible shots. You held lines that shouldn't have held. You took command when I went down. You brought your team home. And when your body finally gave out after giving everything you had, the wisdom to accept help. That's not failure, Cross. That's being human. That's being part of a team. Derek grinned despite the tension. Besides, you've saved our asses about 40 times today. We owed you one. The distinctive thump of rotor blades echoed through the ravine. The helicopters were coming in now, their pilots reporting clear approach, no threats detected. All elements prepare for extraction, Garrett commanded. Wounded first, then by squad. Maintain security until everyone's aboard. The next 20 minutes were controlled chaos as casualties were loaded, equipment secured, defensive positions abandoned in sequence. The enemy force, leaderless with Volkov dead, their assault broken against positions they couldn't overcome, didn't pursue. They'd learned the cost of fighting Americans in terrain that favored precision over numbers. Elena was among the last aboard behind Garrett, who'd refused to leave until every one of his men was safe. She collapsed into the helicopter's troop bay, her M210 across her lap, her body finally allowing exhaustion to claim what it had delayed for 30 hours. Garrett settled beside her as the helicopter lifted, banking away from the serpent's throat and the bodies that marked its length. You did exceptional work today, Cross. 24 men are going home because of you. Elena looked out at the mountain receding below, at the place where she'd made her stand, where she'd learned that even the finest shooters couldn't do everything alone. I missed, sir. When it mattered most, I missed. No, you were human when it mattered most. There's a difference. He met her eyes. You want to know what I saw today? I saw an operator who made impossible shots for 30 hours, who took command in combat, who had the strength to ask for help when she needed it. That's not weakness, Cross. That's wisdom. That's what separates good operators from great leaders. The flight to the forward operating base took 40 minutes. Elena slept for 38 of them, the deep unconsciousness of someone who'd pushed past every physical limit. She woke to Garrett shaking her shoulder gently, the helicopter settling onto the landing pad. Medical teams waited, triaging wounded, checking everyone for injuries missed in the adrenaline of combat. The debriefing took 6 hours. Intelligence officers command staff investigators from Ghost Protocol's parent agency. Everyone wanted to know how a rogue operator and a SEAL colonel had stumbled into a Russian arms smuggling operation that reached into American command structure. Elena told them everything. The ambush, the decision to break protocol, Peterson's betrayal, Volkov's admission about Kate, the battle through the Serpents the road, the team's shot that ended it all. They recorded everything, promised investigations, made assurances about justice and accountability. 4 weeks later, Elena stood on the parade ground at the Special Operations Training Center in Virginia Beach, wearing dress uniform that felt foreign after years of tactical gear. The November wind carried the salt smell of the Atlantic, cold and clean. Garrett Stone, his arms still in a sling, stood at the podium before 300 assembled warriors. In 34 years of service, he said, his voice carrying across the parade ground, I've had the privilege of serving alongside some of the finest warriors this nation has produced. Today we recognize someone who embodies everything we value, someone who made the hard calls, someone who stood alone against impossible odds, someone who had the wisdom to know when to accept help. He paused, looking directly at Elena. Sergeant Elena Cross, front and center. She marched forward, halting before Garrett at parade rest. He held a small blue box containing the Navy Cross, second highest decoration for valor. The citation had taken 4 weeks to draft, redacted portions hiding Ghost Protocol's existence, but the core truth remained. One woman, one rifle, 24 lives saved, one conspiracy destroyed, one war criminal eliminated, and the wisdom to know that even the finest warriors need their team. Garrett pinned the medal to her uniform. Kate would be proud, Cross. You kept your promise. You didn't stay silent, and you saved a lot of lives because of it. Thank you, sir, for everything. Thank you for reminding us what we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to stand for. After the ceremony, Derek approached with official orders. You're assigned to SEAL Team 12 Special Operations Support Sniper Specialty. Welcome aboard officially. That evening, Elena stood alone at the base memorial wall, where fallen operators were remembered with bronze plaques. She'd requested a new addition, and it had been approved. Kate Brennan, friend, partner, hero. Garrett found her there as the sun set over the Atlantic. She'd be proud, he said quietly, of what you did, of who you've become, of the fact that you finally learned you don't have to carry everything alone. I kept my promise about not staying silent, but I broke my promise to her about the shot. I missed when it mattered most. No, you learned the most important lesson when it mattered most. Garrett's voice was gentle but firm. You can't do everything alone, not forever, not without breaking. The strength isn't in never needing help. The strength is in being brave enough to accept it. Elena traced Kate's name on the plaque, feeling something settle in her chest that had been restless for 18 months. She pulled a folded letter from her pocket, Kate's last words found in the personal effects Elena had been too afraid to read until now. Elena, if you're reading this, I didn't make it home. Don't blame yourself. We both knew the risks, but promise me something. Don't let my death make you afraid of living. Don't become a ghost who watches from a distance. Find people you trust. Let them close. Build something beyond the next mission. You're the best shooter I ever worked with, but more than that, you're the best friend I ever had. Don't waste that gift by spending your life alone, convinced that isolation keeps you safe. It doesn't. It just keeps you from being alive. Stay loud, Elena. Never stay silent. And when you get that impossible shot, take it. But know that if you miss, if you're human, if you need help, that's not failure. That's life. And life is messy and imperfect and beautiful specifically because we need each other. Love always, Kate. Elena's tears fell on the paper, blurring ink that had waited 18 months to deliver its wisdom. Kate had known, had understood, had left instructions for a future she'd never see. She knew, Elena whispered. She knew I'd need to learn this, that being strong meant accepting help, not refusing it. The best partners always know what we need before we do, Garrett said. Elena folded the letter carefully, placed it back in her pocket beside Kate's dog tags. She looked out at the Atlantic, at the base where her team was preparing for the next mission, at the life she'd almost thrown away by choosing isolation over connection. What happens now, sir? Now you do what you do best. You train, you shoot, you serve with people who trust you and have your back. And when that impossible shot comes again, and it will, you take it. And if you miss, you let your team catch you, because that's what teams do. That sounds complicated. It is, but I think you're finally ready for complicated. That night alone in her quarters, Elena sat with Kate's letter and her medal and the rifle that had carried her through 30 hours of hell. She'd climbed a mountain as a ghost convinced that isolation was strength. She'd descended it as a warrior surrounded by a team that had saved her when she couldn't save herself. Kate had been right about everything, staying loud, never staying silent. And understanding that the finest shots weren't the ones made alone in perfect conditions. They were the ones that missed, that failed, that fell short, and the team that caught you when you did. Elena Cross had been the lone wolf, the perfect sniper, the operator who never missed. Now she was something better, something harder, something more human. She was a warrior who understood that strength came not from never needing help, but from having the courage to accept it. And in a world that demanded perfection, that might have been the most important lesson of all. Outside her window, the Atlantic rolled endless against Virginia shore. Tomorrow would bring new training, new missions, new mountains to climb. But tonight, for the first time in 18 months, Elena Cross slept without ghosts haunting her dreams. She'd kept her promises. She'd saved her team. She'd learned to live again. Kate would have approved.